Hey guys, welcome back to another Super Unreal Power tutorial. Last time we worked on some projectile damage, and today we're going to take a look at how to do melee damage with weapons. Now here's an example of what it's going to look like. So here's our guy, and we've got a couple swords here. Those are just the collision check boxes. And then we will attack him, and he's taking some damage, and boom. Well, that's how it's going to look, so now we'll just dive right in. Okay, now before we get started, let's go over the asset packs that I'm using for this tutorial here. So the first one that I have is this Weapon Series Japan Weapons Mini Pack. And I'm just using this one because it has a bunch of great looking static mesh weapons. And that's kind of what I've based this tutorial set on, is on using melee damage with static mesh weapons just to make it easy to use and easy to modify. The second animation pack that I have is this two sword animation pack, and it's just a weapon animation pack that I like to use and I thought was really cool. But for the sake of this tutorial, you can use any static mesh weapons you want and any animation packs that you might have already. Also, another good thing to note is if you don't want to buy any of these packs, or if you haven't bought any of these packs, you can easily get these off of Mixamo. Ah, So Mixamo just has a whole bunch of free assets that you can download, and they've got animations and stuff too. So if ever you just don't want to pay for the asset, you can always find some animations from here to download as well. So with that, let's get into the project. Now, just to keep things simplified here, I actually created a new project and did a bunch of stuff ahead of time because it's all kind of stuff that I've covered in previous tutorials, like my fireball tutorial or even the last tutorial that I did, which was on super speed, I believe. I will kind of quickly glance over it just to kind of show you guys exactly what I did. So go ahead and follow along and we'll get right into it. All right, so I have a folder here. I just called it Melee Tutorial, and inside I have another folder with the animations from the animation pack that I am using. So most of these animations are different attacks, but we're only going to use one for this tutorial, and then a bunch of these are the animations that you need to move around. All right. Now we've got basically 5 different blueprints to use here in addition to this game mode base, which we really only have so we can change the default pawn here. So with this, I don't have any code inside it, just here so we can, like I said, so we can change the default character. Now what I did for the primary character that we have is I took the third person character here, and then I created a couple child blueprint classes, one for the melee character that we'll be using, and then another one for this enemy character that we will also do a little bit of work for too. Next, I also created a blend space, which I just used a simple, I think they call it a one-dimensional, I think it's a one-dimensional blend space, is that what they call it? Animation, yeah, we used a blend space 1D, and for the horizontal axis, I gave it the name of speed. And then for 0, I just put in an idle animation. I put in an animation for walk, and then I have a run. So if you take the green dot and drag it along, you can kind of see how it blends the animations for this here one-dimensional blend space. So I'll close that guy out. And then with that blend space, we created a animation blueprint here. And with the start, I just I saved the locomotion pose. Well, I created a state machine here, and then I used a saved pose, a saved cache here. And then we're blending animations because we want to be able to move our legs and attack at the same time. So we take this saved slot and we plug that into the base pose, and then we get another reference to the base pose. We plug that into our upper body slot, which I will show you guys how that works in a minute. Plug that in for our blend space pose here, and back into our default slot, and then into the output. Now, for the layered blend per bone, we also have the bone name of spine01, and how we got that was for the skeleton of our mesh, I just found the bone That is where we want to blend the upper body animations with the lower body animations or the lower body run. So that's where I got that bone name, and you do want to make sure that you type in the bone name exactly as it appears in the skeleton, otherwise it won't work at all. Now in our locomotion, I created an idle state where we just plugged in the basic, idle pose here, and then we blend that into a walk run, which is where our blend space comes in. We created a variable for speed here, and then, whoops, I need to go back here. And then for the transition states, we just are plugging in our speed, making sure that if our speed is greater than 0.1, then we're going to enter transition from the idle to our walk run state, and then for the transition back, if we are less than or equal to 0.1, then we will go back. Now for the event graph, didn't do too much here, just try get pawn owner, checking if it's valid, cast to our third person character, and we're creating a reference because later on we are going to use this reference to call some different functions so we can connect the damage trace to where we are in our animation state, or in our animation montage. So we've got that, plugged in our speed, and then that's all we've got for the animation blueprint, so we'll close out of that. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of what we've done so far. There's one other little piece for the skeleton. I actually added a couple new sockets. These sockets are attached to the hands, and I've already repositioned them and given them a preview asset, which is going to be the size this time, just to mix things up. And so those are kind of already in position to be right where they will fit. Now, if you want to add different types of weapons, what I found to be kind of simplest and easiest, and there could be a better way to do this, but so far this is what I think is the best way to do. You can just create another socket here if you wanted to, and then add a new preview asset. And we're just going to call this, instead of left-hand socket, we're just going to call this left weapon 2, I guess. And then we can add a new preview asset. We'll just do our katana. And then for this one, you can just move it into the position of where you would want that weapon to be instead. For our base weapon, we're going to set it so you can select what weapon socket you want, and then that way it'll snap the weapon to the socket that it needs to go to. So like for the katana, we could just say left weapon 2 instead, and that way it doesn't snap to the position that the sai is in. Alright, now with that, we should be all set to go here. The first blueprint that we're going to be making here, or that I haven't made already at least, is going to be our weapon blueprint. So we're just going to add an actor blueprint, and let's just call this a BP weapon base. Okay, and then we are going to crack this open and add some variables and a little bit of functionality here. Now first things first, we're going to add a new component, which is going to be a static mesh, and let's just call this weapon mesh. And then for this weapon mesh, we'll just throw in that sai, and that way we've got something to look at here. Now we're going to take this weapon mesh and we're going to drag it over the default scene root, because that's all that we're going to be using here. And now this part is kind of important here. We want to make sure that with the weapon mesh selected, we go and we turn off collision, because we aren't going to be using the collision from this weapon mesh to define how we're going to deal damage. So we're actually going to be using a sphere trace to do that. So now let's create a couple new variables here. Well, actually we'll be creating a little more than a couple. So let's start with, we're going to create some sockets here. So first we need an equip socket, and we're going to do _r, and we're going to change this to a name. And now we are just going to duplicate this. You can hit, with it selected, you can hit Control W and it'll, well, duplicate it. And then we're just going to change that to an L. And then we're going to duplicate this again. Instead of equip socket, we are going to make this an unequip socket. We're not going to do much with an unequip socket for now, but basically this is, if you want to put your weapons like in a sheath or something like that, then that's what this would be for. But we want the functionality pre-built for the system where we equip the weapons. So we're going to Control W one more time, add the L. And now we're also going to need a couple sockets in the weapon here. So these weapon sockets are actually going to come from the static mesh that we have. So we can actually quickly get to that skeleton by selecting our weapon mesh and then grabbing our static mesh and double clicking on that. And here I've already added a couple sockets, but what you would do is over in the socket manager, bottom left, unless you've rearranged your panels to be different than mine, you can select create socket here, and then you could just name this to whatever you want, maybe handle or something. And then you can actually move these sockets to different places on the sword. And the reason why we have these is because the sphere trace that we're going to be using is actually going to be creating a sphere based off of these 2 points here, the weapon tip and the weapon bottom. And it's really important that we keep these weapon socket names the same. So just for simplicity's sake, we're going to leave them as a weapon bottom and weapon tip, or create them as those. Right, so we'll close out of the SI, back to our weapon base. We're going to create a couple new name variables, so let's duplicate those. This is going to be weapon bottom socket, and then we are going to have a weapon tip socket as well. Now we want to make sure that all of these are editable so that we can change them on our on the weapons themselves. Because basically how this is going to work is we've got this base weapon here, and we can create children off of this base weapon, make them whatever we want, and they'll have all these same variable stats that we can edit here. And that way, for creating new weapons, it's as easy as creating a child blueprint and changing some numbers. So we need one more variable here. And this new variable is going to be weapon damage. And this is going to have to be a float. Compile and save first, actually, because we can't edit it yet. Then we will change the damage just to 25. Now we also want to put the default value on these sockets. And that way, if we, just in case we forget something, it's going to be putting the weapon somewhere, or at least the basic sockets. For weapon tip, we just used, I'm going to throw in weapon tip for that. And then for the weapon bottom, we're just going to type in weapon bottom, which 5. Now for the unequipped, or the equip socket, I don't quite remember what we actually used for that. So let me open up the skeleton again. Left-hand weapon and right-hand weapon. Okay, simple enough. Back to our base weapon. This is weapon equip socket right, so we'll do right-hand weapon. And then for the equip socket left, we'll type in left-hand weapon. There, so our defaults are now set. And that is it for the weapon. So we'll close out of that. Alright, back at the main screen here, we are going to next work on our montage, because without the montage we can't attack. So over in our animations folder here, we're going to find one of our attacks here. I think that's the one we wanted to use, yep. So I'll close out of that. We're going to right click this animation sequence, because it's not a montage yet. And we are going to create an Anim montage, and let's just call this attack 01. And then we're going to open that up. Now again, I said that we had a different slot that we created, and if you don't have a slot already, you can go to this Anim slot manage here on the bottom right, and you could add a slot. I've already got this upper body slot created. Also, one thing to remember too is that in the animation blueprint, you won't be able to change this slot to upper body if it's not created already. So in order to complete this, if you're not seeing your upper body slot, you'll have to create that in the montage. Now here we're going to change the default slot to the upper body slot, and then just hit apply to asset over in the top right here, and then it'll go back to business as usual. Now in this animation montage, we are going to create some anim notifies, and with these anim notifies, we are going to use those to select when we want the cue for the damage trace to go off. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new notify, and we're just going to call this attack start right. And then we're going to add another notify, and we're going to call this attack, whoops, end right. And let's pause this guy's animations real quick. So we want to move these to where in the animation we want the damage trace to start. So his right hand is the one without the sword, this one right here. And so when this is out to where it should be dealing damage, probably right about, let's go right about there. We're going to put the start attack start right at this point. And then we're going to move our animation ahead a little bit to where the attack basically ends. And we're going to get the attack here. So, okay, and then we want the attack end right here. Now that's for our right hand weapon, but this guy is going to be using two different weapons. So let's add a new track just to keep track of our animation notifies. We're going to add a new notify, and this one's going to be attack start left. And then we'll create our second one, attack end left. And just like we did before, we're going to move along the track and find where we want to do the damage. So we probably actually want him to start dealing damage about right where it's at. And then we want that damage trace to end probably right about there. So we'll move the end point back to here. Now if you wanted, like maybe your animation has multiple attack route, you could add another attack left and start and end here, and then it would open up that trace again. But for now, that's all we need. So let's save this, and we'll close out of our montage, and then we're going to go back into our animation blueprint. And then let's go to our event graph here. Create some things first. Okay, so before we get into our animation blueprint, we will need to open up our base character, and we're going to have to create a couple events that we can reference here. So let's open the full blueprint editor, and we are going to start with a couple new variables here. So the first two variables that we're going to have are the first variable that we need, I guess, we only need one for now, we're going to call it is weapon trace on. And then we're going to create a couple custom events here. Custom event, and we're going to call this one weapon trace right, or we'll just put an R actually just to keep it shorter. And then let's create another custom event, and then this is going to be weapon trace left. We're also going to need a couple new variables here that probably won't make any sense for now, but we need them for the animation montage, or the animation blueprint now. So we're going to create a new blueprint, and we are going to call this already damaged enemies right. And let's set the variable type to actor. And then we need to convert these to an array. So let's duplicate this now. And this, of course, is going to be left. And that's all we need for now. So we're going to save. We'll go back into our animation blueprint. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab all of those anim notifies, which once those are created in a montage, they will show up right here when we search. So let's type in anim notify. We used attack start right. And we've got attack end right, attack start left, and attack end left. Alright, so I created a reference to both the base character and the melee character here, and we need the melee character reference. So we'll grab that guy. Again, we'll put one in each side. And then from here, we're going to start with checking if our weapon trace is on. Well, actually, we'll be setting whether our weapon trace is on here. And then let's actually plug this in. If once the attack starts, we want to turn the trace on, and then when the attack ends, we want to shut that off. So off of our melee character, we're going to get that weapon trace event that we created for the right weapon. And then off of the character reference, we are also going to want our already damaged enemies. So how this is going to work is with a sphere trace, we're going to create a window of opportunity for when the character will deal damage. And then once a character's been dealt damage, we don't want continuous damage. So, which is kind of one of the tricky parts with trying to build this damage system, and that's really right there is the biggest part of, or one of the biggest parts of why I started this tutorial anyway. But with this, it's going to take the characters that we damaged and put them into an array of already damaged enemies. But if the attack window has ended, we want to clear that already damaged enemies array so we can hit them again on another attack. Off of this, we are going to get a clear. We'll plug this in. And then we're going to do the same thing down here, except we're going to change all of the, we're going to change it from right to left. This guy in. Already damaged enemies left. Get that one there. We need a new weapon trace here for the left side. And here we should be all set for the animation blueprint now. So we'll save this, we'll close, and now we're going to start working in the character here. Now before we build out what these custom events do, we should create the variables that we're going to need. Let's add a new variable, and we're going to call this one equipped weapon, and then we'll make this one right. Let's turn this from an array to the standard. We're going to change this to the base variable, and then we're also going to set this to the base weapon. Object reference, and then let's duplicate this, and then once again change the R to an L. And next we're going to create something basically the same, but we need references to the base weapon class rather than the base weapon itself. Let's create a new variable here. We're going to call this attached weapon R, and then weapon base again, and then let's highlight it and click the class reference. Let's duplicate this. Oh, looks like we can't duplicate it like that. So what we're going to do is just create a new variable, attached weapon L, and that should be the weapon base as well. Now we've already got our already damaged enemies, and we just want to have one more, or technically two more, Boolean variables depending on how many weapons you're allowing your characters to have equipped. So we'll have this one is weapon set. Oops, hold on. We want this to be is weapon set R, and then let's change this to a Boolean. Control W. Is weapon set left or L, and we want one last Boolean called is weapon equipped. Then we can compile and save, and then let's set what the equipped weapons are as a standard. The attached weapon is as a standard, I mean. Pick the weapon base, attached weapon left, pick weapon base. These guys are all set, and there we go. Okay, now before we get into the weapon traces here, we're going to get the functionality for attaching the weapons to the character. So we're going to need, let's move these guys over here. We're going to create a new custom event, and we're going to call this pickup event. And then let's up here just drag a begin play, and then off of begin play we're going to just call that pickup event. And now let's define what pickup event does. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get a couple of branches here. Try not to have too many Boolean variables like anymore, just because it's not that clean. But these two are pretty simple and cut and dry. So we're just going to check if our right weapon is set. And then we're going to have to run this code twice, but it's like when you do that, it's actually pretty easy. You can just copy and paste stuff. For our second one, our second branch, we actually need to make sure that we have a valid weapon class. So let's get our attached weapon. And then from here, we're going to get is valid. Valid class, plug that in for our condition. If the weapon is not set, then we want to check if the weapon class is valid and then try and attach it. If it is set, then we don't want it to do anything. We don't want to add, basically we don't want to add two weapons, or a weapon on top of a weapon. Now after this, we're going to get our equipped weapon right, and we're going to check if that's valid, except this time with the, not the function reference, but the one with the executable on it. And here, if we already have an equipped weapon valid, what we're going to do is destroy that actor. Whoops, come on. And this way we can replace the equipped weapon with something else. And then after the destroy actor, we want to spawn an actor from class, and then that class is actually going to come from our attached weapon here. So we'll plug that in, and then let's just get a reroute node and move that a little bit out of the way just to keep things clean. Now if we don't have a valid equipped weapon, then we are going to spawn one. Now to get that location, what we're going to do is we are going to get the class defaults of our attached weapon, and we're going to get that weapon equip socket here. And since we're using the right hand weapon, we're going to use weapon equip socket right. We are going to get socket transform, and then plug the return value in for that spawn transform in the spawn actor node up here. We'll tidy it up a bit. Now next we're going to set it to our equipped weapon here. And next we have a couple of functions that we're going to create here first. So let's create these two functions, and then actually we're going to have four functions, but we're going to create those, and then before we define what they do, we're just going to complete this setup here. So new function, we're going to call this equip weapon right. Let's duplicate this. Equip weapon left. Duplicate. We're going to have an unequip, duplicate, and unequip left. And that's all we need here. So back in our event graph, we're going to grab our weapon equip right, plug in the executables here. And now we're going to get is weapon set right, and we're going to set that to true, plug in our executables, and then that is how we will equip our right hand weapon here. So for the left, we're going to just copy everything, paste it down here, and we're going to take this executable because after we check for right, we want to check for left, and we'll plug that in for the branch. Let's get a couple reroute nodes just to keep things tidy. And then we'll start changing things out, starting with this is weapon set to left. We're going to do equip weapon left instead. Get rid of this guy, drag that one into place. Get our equip weapon L, or equipped weapon L. And let's grab our attached weapon L. Make sure, oh, we got one more here. Equip. There we go. Get rid of that. And let's see, are we missing anything else? Is weapon set R? Yep, we want that one to be left. And I think that's all we've got here. So if that's all good, we're going to put a comment over this. And we're just going to call this equip weapon, or equip weapon function. Let's change the color a little bit just for fun. Make that, and we'll go with a nice green or something like that. There we go. And now we can, all right, now we can work on those weapon traces here. So let's compile and save. Build one right there. Move this guy out of the way a little bit. Okay, now first, before we do the trace, we want to check if we have a weapon equipped, because we do not want to be attacking, we don't want to be dealing damage if we don't have any weapons, because, well, I mean, I guess we could count fists, but for sake of this, we're counting weapon damage. So we'll get is weapon equipped, throw in a branch,
Plug the condition in, and we're going to check if our weapon trace is on. Get another branch. If we have a weapon equipped, and if our trace is on, we are next going to do a sphere trace by channel. Push it out a little bit. And since this is our right hand weapon, we're going to grab our equipped weapon here, and we need to get the start and end locations for this trace. So off of equipped weapon, we're going to get our weapons mesh. And from our weapons mesh, we need to get a couple socket location nodes. One. Plug one of these into the end, one of them into the start, and then this is where we're going to need to remember our socket names. Lucky for us, we just used weapon bottom, helps to spell it right, and weapon tip. And then we want to change our radius here. I've kind of worked with 17.5 when I was building the tutorial, just because that seemed like a pretty decent radius for that. So if you want to change it to something else, you could. If you had, a thicker blade or something like that, you could always change your radius again as well. But we're going to go with that for sake of example. Let's change the trace channel to camera. And the drop debug type, this is going to show that sphere that we want, or that's going to be where we can deal damage. And we just want to see that for the duration of the attack, and that way we can just tell if the trace is working and if it's connecting, more importantly, with the enemy. Once you kind of know it works, you can just come back in and switch that to none, and then you're good to go. And that's everything for this. And then off of the hit result, we want to drag that off and break it. Let's expand. Off of the hit actor, we're going to cast to our third person character. If you remember, our base enemy character is based off of the third person character as well. So this will pull information from enemy characters, and all enemy characters that are also based off of that enemy base too. Next, we want to grab all of our damaged enemies for the right, and we're going to make sure that the enemy that we just hit here, we're going to check if that enemy's been hit already. So let's drag off of our already damaged enemies, and we're going to type in contains item, and that we're going to see if that item is the character we just hit. Grab another branch. I feel like branches are like the most commonly used node in all of Unreal 4. Now, if the enemy that we just hit is not a part of our already damaged enemies list, then, which would be off of the false node, we want to apply damage. And now that the damaged actor is going to come from our hit actor, or the third person character reference that we just had. The base damage is going to come from our weapon, so let's grab our equipped weapon again. We're going to get base damage, or what did I call it? Weapon damage. Come on, there we go. Plug that in. Let's get this, let's push this out a little bit and then give us a little bit of space here. The instigator is going to be our player controller, and the damage causer is going to be self, because the damage is being caused by our third person character here. Now after that, if you wanted to do a print string here, you could, just to do some tests. I'm skipping that this time. And we're going to get our list of already damaged enemies for the right. And I'm going to add, plug the executable in, and we are going to add the enemy that we just hit. And now, after we've dealt damage to this enemy here, we're going to add it to that list that it wasn't already a part of. And then we are going to have just a short delay. And the reason why we have this delay is because it kind of just makes sure that we finish this whole check before we try to check again, because that's what we're going to be doing. So I'll do a delay, and let's just set it to 0.01 or 0.01. There we go. We're going to plug this back into our branch node for weapon trace here. And then again, let's get some reroute nodes just to, or so you can see what's going on. Alright, move that out of the way. And then we've got one more thing to add and then we're good. So if we are casting to this character and the cast fails, then we want to plug that into the delay and do this again. Now I'm going to actually plug in a print string here and just say cast to enemy failed, and then we'll just type in right so we know which side failed. So plug this in, and there we go. So this is our code for the right hand weapon trace. And now let's build our left hand weapon trace. So let's zoom out just a bit, grab everything that we just did, copy and paste, move this in, plug, and now we're going to be switching all of our variables from left to right. So let's get our equipped weapon L. Already damaged enemies L. Equipped weapon L. Let's change this print string from right to left. Already damaged enemies L. And let's just make one more look and make sure that we didn't miss anything here. Right, looks like we're good. Let's do another comment box. And this is just going to say weapon trace. Let's change the color to, let's do red. Okay. And now our character is basically going to be able to do everything we need. Let's test real quick. Alright, and now our character has a katana, or a sai. And we missed something here, so we're going to have to go back and see what we missed here. So let's exit. Let's make sure that the pickup event is working rightly. Ah, there we go. So we need to change this to that. And we actually still have all these equip functions that we want to do too. And that's why our weapons didn't stick to our hands here. So let's go back to our equipped weapon here. We're going to grab our equipped weapon right, and we are going to attach actor to component, plug this in. The parent is going to be our character's mesh. The socket name is going to come from our equipped weapon, and that's going to be our equipped socket. So let's get equipped socket, get equipped socket right. There we have our socket name. We're going to set this to snap to target, and then we're going to set his weapon equipped to true. Come on, here we go. We'll get a return node. Okay, and then for left, we want to copy all of our code because it's going to be basically the same thing for all of the other ones. Equip left, and then we'll change equipped from equipped left to equipped right, and the equipped socket to left. Delete that one. Okay, so now that we got those equipped sockets, we can save and play. And now the weapons should go right where we want them to. Alright, perfect.
Alright, now before we can actually make this character attack, we got to set up the input action mappings. So we'll go into the edit menu, and I've already got these set up, but I'll show you what I put in. Project settings, and then on the left we need to go to inputs, and I just added to the action mappings a basic attack and an equip weapon, and I put in a key for each of those and also a gamepad button too, because I've been testing with a controller. So we'll close out of that, and now with our two functions, let's go up to the top, and then we'll right click and add our input action attack. I think it's going to be basic attack actually. We'll do basic attack. And now off of our basic attack, we're going to get our reference to our character mesh, and we are going to play montage.
Plug that in for the pressed. And then on the montage to play, we're just going to use that, that animation attack one that we created earlier. And then we'll slide over just a bit and let's add that equip function too. We don't necessarily need it this time, but we'll put that in anyway. Input action equip weapon. And that is just going to use this function here that we created. Pick up event. Currently, we're just going to be calling this function as soon as we start gameplay. But if that's not something you want to do, or just for the future, this is how you would set up a weapon equip function here. So let's compile that, and we'll save. Alright, so the only thing that we have left is to set up the enemy character to actually receive damage and die to. So let's open up our enemy blueprint. Now, we haven't set up any functionality in this character, so the first thing we need to do is create a couple of variables here. The first one is going to be health, and we're going to create another one and call it isDead. And then let's set that health variable to a float, and then we'll compile and save, and that way we can set our health to 100. Now, the only thing that we really need to add here is a function called eventAnyDamage. Alright, fine. There we go. Now we're going to get our health. And then from our health, we are going to subtract. We're going to subtract any damage taken. And then we're going to set our health to whatever that new value is. And then we'll connect the executionable pins. Now this is going to update the health, but we want to check if he's dead next. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw in a branch. And we're going to get our current health again. And we're going to check if it is less than or equal to 0. And we'll plug this in for our condition. Now, if that's true, that our health is less than or equal to 0, we're going to grab isDead. And we are going to set that to true. Let's just move this a little bit out of the way here. Alright, next we're going to get a reference to our character movement here. And from this reference we're going to get out a couple nodes just to make sure that the enemy character doesn't do anything after it dies. So we'll drag off and get stop active movement. And then we are also going to get stop movement immediately. Next we're going to put in a couple of print strings just for debugging purposes. We'll drag off of the last node, print string. We're going to type in, we'll just say enemy dead. And then we'll just make it red just to get it to stand out. There we go. Now off the false, if the character is not dead but they still took damage, we could do some other things like throw in an animation, like a hit animation or something like that. We're just going to drag off and put in a print string. And then off this print string, we're just going to say, just for kicks and giggles, we'll say not dead yet. And let's set this to red as well. Now, one other thing that we want to do is we want to set it so that our character can actually do a death animation when he dies. And I think that the easiest way to do that is to go into our animation graph. And we'll just add the functionality there. So let's go back into our character mesh here. Let's find the animation blueprint. Search for it. And then let's open that blueprint. And in the animation graph, let's drag off of our idle walk run state. And let's create a new state. And we're just going to call this isDead. And let's drag back from isDead to idle walk run so we can have a transition back and forth. And we'll open up that new state. And then we need our death animation. So let's type in, I think, dead. Yep. We'll drag this. We'll connect the pins. And then we want to make sure that this animation is not looping. So we'll uncheck loop animation.
Otherwise, this character will just die over and over and over again, and, well, that's obviously not what we want this to do. So we'll compile. Oh, we gotta go back and do our transitions real quick. So for the transition to the isDead state, we're going to drag off and we're going to promote this to a new variable. Let's just call this dead. And then we'll go back to the other transition. Let's get that new variable. And let's get a not boolean. And we'll plug that in. So basically, if we're not dead, then it's going to bring us back to our idle walk run. Now let's go to the event graph and finish it up. Okay. So right off of our try get pawn owner, we're going to need to cast to our enemy character. Let's see, base enemy. And we'll just drag that to the end here. And now we need this cast so we can get our isDead variable in that character. And then we'll set our current isDead variable to the casted isDead from the enemy character. So we'll close that. And that should be everything. And now we should be able to test this and see how it works. Alright, so now we're in. Okay, looks like our trace is working right. Let's go over to our enemy and let's attack him. It looks like it dealt damage from both weapons there. As you can see, it's got the darker colors and the lighter green. And we attack him again and he's dead. Alright, and that's all that we need to do for this basic damage system. Hope you guys got something out of it. As always, like and subscribe, and if you can think of any other power tutorials that you'd like to see, go ahead and leave it in the comments below, and we'll see you next time on Super Unreal Powers.